The Builders, The Origin and History of Freemasonry, by Joseph Fort Newton. Part 1. Prophecy. Chapter 1. The Foundations. By symbols is mankind guided and governed, rendered joyful, rendered miserable. He perpetually finds himself encircled by symbols, acknowledged as such or unacknowledged. The universe is but one vast symbol of God. Nay, if thou wilt have it, what is man himself but a symbol of God? Is not all that he executes symbolical, a revelation to sense of the mystical God-given force that is in him, a gospel of freedom which he, the Messiah of nature, promulgates as he can by word and act? Not a hut he constructs, but is the tangible manifestation of a thought, but carries a perceptible record of invisible elements, but remains, in the transcendental sense, symbolical as well as literal. Thomas Carlyle, Sartor Resartus. Two disciplines have transformed the surface of the globe and imparted structure to the existence and philosophy of mankind, agriculture and architecture. Between the pair, it would prove arduous to ascertain which has been more profoundly intertwined with the internal consciousness of humanity, as man is not merely a cultivator and a constructor, but a mystic and a philosopher. For such an entity, particularly during archaic epochs, any endeavor represented something beyond its mere execution. It constituted a truth discovered. In achieving utility, it acquired a specific configuration, encapsulating simultaneously an idea and an enigma. Our current examination pertains to the latter of these disciplines, which has been designated as the matrix of civilization. When we investigate origins and pursue the primary impetus that propelled craftsmanship forward, we identify two foundational elements: corporeal necessity and spiritual aspiration. Naturally, the initial profound motivation for all architecture was necessity, a sincere reaction to the requirement for sanctuary, yet this requirement encompassed a home for the soul no less than a canopy over the head. Even within this reaction to fundamental necessity, there existed a spiritual dimension that elevated it beyond mere physical accommodation, as the inhabitants of Egypt, for example, desired an imperishable resting place, and therefore constructed the pyramids. As Capart observes, prehistoric artistry demonstrates that this utilitarian objective was in nearly every instance amalgamated with a religious, or at a minimum a magical, intention. The spiritual inclination, in endeavoring to reconstruct archetypes and to establish more harmonious associations with the cosmos, culminated in emulation, in concepts of proportion, in the fervor for aesthetics, and in the pursuit of perfection. Man has perpetually been a constructor, and nowhere has he manifested himself more profoundly than within the edifices he has established. When we position ourselves before them, whether it be an earthen hovel, the residence of a cliff-dweller affixed like a swallow's nest to the precipice of a canyon, a pyramid, a Parthenon, or a pantheon, we appear to peer into his soul. The constructor may have departed, perhaps millennia prior, yet here he has relinquished a fragment of himself, his aspirations, his apprehensions, his conceptions, his reveries. Even within the distant fastnesses of the Andes, amid the tumult of the natural world, and where man presently exists as a mere savage, we encounter the vestiges of immense, extinguished civilizations, wherein artistry and science and theology attained unparalleled zeniths. Wherever humanity has resided and labored, we discover the disintegrating remnants of spires, sanctuaries, and sepulchres, monuments to its diligence and its ambition. Furthermore, whatever else man may have embodied, cruel, tyrannical, vindictive, his structures invariably maintain a correlation with religion. They articulate a profound perception of the unseen and his consciousness of his relationship thereto. In truth, the narrative of the Tower of Babel represents more than a mere fable. Humanity has consistently endeavored to construct towards the heavens, materializing its supplications and its visions in brick and stone. For there exist two categories of reality, the material and the spiritual, yet they remain so intricately intertwined that all practical statutes serve as manifestations of moral principles. Such is the postulate that Ruskin elucidates with profound acumen and eloquence within his 7 Lamps of Architecture, wherein he contends that the principles of architecture are inherently moral precepts, as applicable to the cultivation of character as to the fabrication of cathedrals. He determines those tenets to be sacrifice, truth, power, beauty, life, memory, and, as the crowning embellishment of all, that doctrine to which polity owes its permanence, life its felicity, faith its reception, and creation its perpetuation. Obedience. He maintains that there exists no such concept as liberty, and indeed there never can be. The celestial bodies possess it not, the terrestrial sphere possesses it not, the ocean possesses it not. Man imagines that he commands autonomy, yet if he were to employ the term loyalty in lieu of liberty, he would approach closer to veracity, since it is through submission to the precepts of life and truth and aesthetics that he achieves what he designates as liberty. Throughout that illustrious treatise, Ruskin demonstrates how the transgression of moral doctrines degrades the elegance of architecture, impairs its utility, and renders it precarious. He observes, utilizing myriad variations of emphasis, exemplification, and entreaty, that beauty constitutes that which is emulated from natural configurations, whether consciously or unconsciously, and that whatever is not thus derived, but relies for its majesty upon an arrangement bestowed by the human intellect, articulates, even as it discloses, the caliber of that intellect, whether it prove noble or ignoble. Consequently, all construction, therefore, portrays humanity as either accumulating or governing, and the arcana of its triumph lie in its comprehension of what to accumulate and how to command. These represent the 2 paramount intellectual lamps of architecture, the former residing in a righteous and modest reverence for the creations of God upon the earth, and the latter in an apprehension of the sovereignty over those creations that has been entrusted to mankind. What our distinguished prophet of artistry thus articulated with such eloquence, primordial humanity anticipated through instinct, indistinctly perhaps, yet no less authentically. If architecture originated from necessity, it expeditiously revealed its magical essence, and all authentic construction engaged the profundities of emotion and unlocked the portals of awe. Undoubtedly, the individuals who initially poised a single stone atop 2 others must have gazed with sheer astonishment upon the labor of their hands, and must have venerated the stones they had erected. This component of mystical wonder and reverence endured extensively throughout the epochs, and remains perceptible when labor is executed in the ancestral manner by remaining deeply connected to nature, necessity, and devotion. From the very inception, concepts of sanctity, of offering, of ritualistic propriety, of magical permanence, of resemblance to the cosmos, of perfection of form and proportion illuminated the heart of the constructor and directed his hand. Wren, philosopher that he was, determined that the gratification of mankind in the erection of columns was acquired through veneration within the groves of the forest, and contemporary investigation has arrived at a fundamentally identical perspective. For Sir Arthur Evans demonstrates that during the primal European epoch columns served as deities. Throughout the entirety of Europe, the nascent dawn of architecture was expended in the adoration of monumental stones. Should we turn our attention to ancient Egypt, where the discipline of construction appears initially to have coalesced its power, and where its vestiges remain optimally preserved, we may discern the philosophies of the most archaic artisans. Long preceding the dynastic era, a robust civilization inhabited the region who cultivated numerous disciplines which they subsequently bequeathed to the pyramid builders. Although merely semi-naked primitives employing flint implements in a manner closely resembling that of the Bushmen, they constituted the foundation, so to speak, of a magnificent artistic lineage. Regarding the Egyptians, Herodotus remarked, "They harvest the bounties of the earth with less exertion than any other populace." Accompanying agriculture and a sedentary existence emerged commerce and stored up vitality which might endeavor to refine upon caverns and excavations and other primitive habitations. Beside the Nile, perhaps, mankind initially aspired to transcend the monotony of the most elemental necessity, and to submit to the dictates of its soul. There he fashioned exquisite vessels from refined marble, and conceived the principles of orthogonal construction. In any event, the most archaic structure presently discovered, a prehistoric sepulchre unearthed within the sands at Hierakonpolis, is already perfectly rectilinear. As Letheby reminds us, contemporary individuals largely take rectangularity for granted as a self-evident configuration, yet the realization of the square represented a monumental advancement in geometry. It inaugurated a novel epoch in the chronicle of the constructors. Primordial innovations must have appeared akin to revelations, as indeed they were, and it is not peculiar that proficient artisans were regarded as magicians. If mankind indeed possesses the knowledge it claims, the discovery of the square constituted a momentous event for the primitive mystics of the Nile. In antiquity, it became an emblem of truth, justice, and righteousness, and thus it remains to this day, though uncountable ages have passed. Simple, familiar, and eloquent, it conveys from afar a sense of the wonder of the dawn, and it continues to impart a lesson that we find difficult to master. So, too, were the cube, the compasses, and the keystone. Each represented a profound advancement for those to whom architecture was indeed construction imbued with emotion, demonstrating that its laws are the laws of the eternal. Maspero relates that the temples of Egypt, even from the earliest epochs, were constructed in the image of the earth as the builders had conceived it. To them, the earth was a sort of flat slab longer than it was wide, and the sky was a ceiling or vault supported by 4 massive pillars. The pavement represented the earth, the 4 angles signified the pillars, and the ceiling, most frequently flat, though occasionally curved, corresponded to the sky. From the pavement grew vegetation, and aquatic plants emerged from the water, while the ceiling, painted a deep blue, was strewn with 5-pointed stars. Occasionally, the sun and moon were depicted floating upon the celestial ocean, escorted by the constellations, as well as the months and the days. There existed a deeply recessed holy sanctuary, small and obscure, approached through a succession of courtyards and columned halls, all meticulously arranged along a central axis to point toward the sunrise. Before the outer gates stood obelisks and avenues lined with statues. Such were the shrines of the ancient solar religion, oriented so that, on a single day of the year, the beams of the rising sun, or of some luminous star heralding its arrival, would stream down the nave and illuminate the altar. Clearly, one ideal of these early builders was that of sacrifice, as evidenced by their utilization of the finest materials, while another was precision of workmanship. Indeed, no small portion of the earliest work exhibited an astonishing technical proficiency, and such craftsmanship must inevitably point to some underlying concept that the artisans sought to actualize. Above all else, they pursued permanence. In subsequent inscriptions pertaining to edifices, phrases such as these occur frequently. It is as the heavens in all its quarters, firm as the heavens. Evidently, the fundamental premise was that, just as the heavens were stable and immovable, a building placed into proper relation with the universe would acquire a magical stability. It is recorded that when Akhenaten founded his new city, for boundary stones were accurately positioned so that it might be exactly square, and thus endure forever. Eternity was the ultimate ideal, with all else being sacrificed to that aspiration. How thoroughly they realized their dream is demonstrated to us by the pyramids. Of all human monuments, the oldest, the most technically perfect, the largest, and the most mysterious. Ages come and go, empires rise and fall, philosophies flourish and falter, and humanity seeks out countless inventions. Yet these monuments stand silent beneath the luminous Egyptian night, remaining as fascinating as they are confounding. An obelisk is essentially a pyramid, albeit one where the base has been elongated into a shaft, holding aloft the most ancient emblems of the solar faith, a triangle mounted upon a square. When and why this figure became holy remains unknown, save for the conjecture that it was among those sacred stones that acquired their sanctity in an epoch far preceding all recollection and tradition, akin to the Kaaba at Mecca. Whether it constitutes an imitation of the triangle of zodiacal light, visible at specific times in the eastern sky during sunrise and sunset, or a feat of masonry utilized as a symbol of heaven, just as the square served as an emblem of earth, no one can definitively affirm. In the pyramid texts, the sun god, upon creating all the other deities, is depicted sitting at the apex of the sky in the guise of a phoenix, that supreme god to whom two architects, Sudi and Hor, composed so noble a hymn of praise. White with the worship of ages, ineffably beautiful and poignant, is the ancient light religion of humanity. A sublime nature mysticism wherein light represented love and life, and darkness signified evil and death. To early man, light was the mother of beauty, the unveiler of color, and the elusive, radiant mystery of the world. His discourse regarding it was both reverent and grateful. At the gates of the morning he stood with uplifted hands, and the sun sinking into the desert at eventide rendered him wistful in prayer, half in fear and half in hope, lest that beauty never return. His religion, upon emerging from the night of animalism, was a veneration of the light. His temple was hung with stars, his altar a glowing flame, and his ritual a woven hymn of night and day. No poet of our contemporary era, not even Shelley, has composed lovelier lyrics in praise of the light than those hymns of Akhenaten, penned in the morning of the world. Memories of this religion of the dawn linger with us today in the faith that follows the day star from on high, and the sun of righteousness. One who is the light of the world in life, and the lamp of poor souls in the night of death. Herein, then, lie the true foundations of masonry, both material and moral. In the profound need and aspiration of mankind, and in his creative impulse, reside his instinctive faith, his quest for the ideal, and his love of the light. Beneath all his construction lay the conviction, prophetic of his ultimate and highest thought, that the earthly house of his life should stand in proper relation to its heavenly prototype, the world temple, imitating on earth the house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. If he erected a square temple, it served as an image of the earth. If he constructed a pyramid, it was a depiction of a beauty revealed to him in the sky, just as, subsequently, his cathedral was modeled after the mountain, its dim and lofty arch a memory of the forest vista, its altar a fireside of the soul, and its spire a prayer in stone. And as he forged his faith and dream into reality, it was only natural that the implements of the builder should become emblems of the reflections of the thinker. Not only his tools, but, as we shall observe, the very stones with which he labored became sacred symbols, the temple itself manifesting as a vision of that house of doctrine, that home of the soul which, though unseen, he continues to build in the midst of the years. Chapter 2. The Working Tools. It began to shape itself within my intellectual vision into something profoundly more imposing and majestic, solemnly mysterious and grand. It appeared to me akin to the pyramids in their solitude, within whose yet undiscovered chambers may be concealed, for the enlightenment of subsequent generations, the sacred texts of the Egyptians, so long lost to the world, like the Sphinx half buried in the desert. In its symbolism, which, alongside its spirit of brotherhood, constitutes its very essence, Freemasonry is more ancient than any of the world's living religions. It possesses the symbols and doctrines that Zarathustra inculcated, which were older even than himself, and it presented to me a spectacle both sublime and piteous, the ancient faith of our ancestors offering the world its once eloquent symbols, mutely and in vain seeking an interpreter. Consequently, I finally came to perceive that the true greatness and majesty of Freemasonry reside in its proprietorship of these and its other symbols, and that its symbolism is its very soul. Albert Pike, Letter to Gould. Never were words truer than those penned by Goethe in the final lines of Faust, and they resonate with one of the most ancient instincts of humanity. All things transitory but as symbols are sent. From the very beginning, mankind has divined that the objects accessible to his senses are more than mere facts, possessing other, hidden significances. The entire world surrounded him as an infinite parable, a mystical and prophetic scroll for which he dedicated himself to discovering the lexicon. Both he and his world were so constituted as to convey a sense of duality, of lofty truths intimated within humble, proximate things. Not even the smallest entity lacked its celestial aspect, which, by means of his winged and perceptive imagination, he sought to apprehend and grasp. Let us acknowledge that man was born a poet, his intellect a chamber of imagery, his world a gallery of art. Despite his utmost endeavors, he can in no wise strip his thought of the flowers and fruits that cling to it, withered though they often are. In truth, he has ever been a denizen of two realms, utilizing the scenery of the visible to illuminate the realities of the unseen world. What marvel is it, then, that trees flourished in his imagination, flowers blossomed within his faith, and the triumph of spring over winter endowed him with the hope of life beyond death, while the procession of the sun and the great stars invited him to reflections that wander throughout eternity. The symbol was his native tongue, his primordial mode of speech, as, indeed, it remains his ultimate one, whereby he was equipped to articulate that which he otherwise could not have expressed. Such is the reality, and even the lexicon through which we state it serves as a dictionary of faded metaphors, the fossilized poetry of bygone epochs. We cannot examine in exhaustive detail that picturesque and variegated labyrinth of humanity's early symbolism, enticing though the prospect may be. Indeed, so luxuriant was that archaic pictorial language that we might easily stray from our course and become lost within the maze, unless we adhere steadfastly to the correct path. Foremost, throughout this examination of prophecy, let us continuously bear in mind a most simple and evident reality, albeit one no less wondrous for its obviousness. Socrates achieved the realization, perhaps the most profound ever attained, that human nature is universal. Through his probing inquiries, he discerned that when men contemplate a problem from all sides and ponder it deeply, they reveal a shared nature and a common framework of truth. Thus, from this empirical fact, the truth regarding the kinship of mankind and the unity of the intellect dawned upon him. His profound insight is corroborated manifold times over, whether we investigate the earliest gropings of the human intellect or place the doctrines of the sages side by side. We consistently discover, upon comparison, that the ultimate deductions of the most sagacious minds concerning the significance of life and the cosmos are harmonious, if not entirely identical. Herein lies the key to the striking correspondences among the faiths and philosophies of vastly separated populaces, rendering them intelligible while augmenting their picturesque and philosophical intrigue. By this same token, we commence to comprehend why identical signs, symbols, and emblems were employed by all societies to articulate their earliest aspirations and intellectual pursuits. We need not deduce that one civilization adopted them from another, or that there existed a mystical, universal fraternity which preserved them. Rather, they simply reveal the unity of the human intellect, demonstrating how and why, at corresponding stages of cultural development, races vastly distanced from one another arrived at the same conclusions and utilized largely identical symbols to manifest their contemplations. Illustrations thereof are myriad, among which a select few may be cited as exemplars of this unity of both concept and emblem, further substantiating the great Greek philosopher's insight that, however superficial intellects may diverge, ultimately all seekers of truth tread a common path, comrades in one grand pursuit. A pertinent example, as ancient as it is eloquent, is the conception of the Trinity and its corresponding emblem, the triangle. Man's conception of God is contingent upon which faculty of the intellect or facet of existence he employs as a lens through which to peer into the mystery of all things. Conceived as the supreme will of the cosmos, God is singular, resulting in the monotheism of Moses. Perceived through the instincts and the kaleidoscope of the senses, God is manifold, yielding polytheism and its myriad deities. Apprehended through the faculty of reason, God constitutes a dualism composed of matter and mind, as observed in the doctrines of Zoroaster and numerous other cults. Yet, when the social existence of humanity serves as the prism of faith, God manifests as a trinity of Father, Mother, and Child. Dating to an era almost as ancient as human thought itself, we encounter the concept of the Trinity and its triangular emblem universally. Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma in India correspond to Osiris, Isis, and Horus in Egypt. Undoubtedly, this concept formed the foundation of the ancient pyramidal emblem, at each corner of which stood one of the deities. No missionary propagated this profound truth across the globe. Rather, it burgeoned from a natural and universal human experience, elucidated by the reality of the human mind's unity and its perception of God through the paradigm of the family. Other emblems transport us to an antiquity so profoundly remote that we seem to walk amidst the shadows of prehistoric epochs. Among these, the enigmatic swastika is arguably the most ancient, just as it is undeniably the most widely disseminated across the globe. Serving equally as a talisman and a symbol, it has been discovered upon Chaldean bricks, amidst the ruins of the city of Troy, in Egypt, upon the vases of ancient Cyprus, within Hittite remnants and Etruscan pottery, in the cavernous temples of India, upon Roman altars and runic monuments in Britain, throughout Tibet, China, and Korea, in Mexico, Peru, and within the prehistoric burial grounds of North America. Manifold interpretations thereof have been proposed. Perhaps the significance most frequently ascribed to it derives from the Sanskrit term whose roots harbor an intimation of life's beneficence, to exist and to fare well. In this capacity, it stands as a signifier indicating that although the labyrinth of existence may bewilder, a path of radiant light traverses it, that it as well serves as the appellation of the path, and the key to eternal life resides within that strange labyrinth for those whom the divine directs. Others maintain it was an emblem of the pole star, whose steadfastness in the celestial sphere, alongside the procession of Ursa Major revolving about it, profoundly captivated the ancient world. Mankind observed the sun traversing the heavens daily along a marginally divergent trajectory, eventually pausing, as it were, at the solstice before commencing its return journey. They beheld the moon altering not merely its orbit, but its magnitude, form, and time of manifestation. Only the pole star remained resolute and immutable, and it became, not unnaturally, a beacon of assurance and the footstool of the Most High. Whatever its true denotation, the swastika illustrates primordial man's endeavors to decipher the enigma of existence, and his intuition of a profound love residing at the very core of life. Akin to the swastika, if not an evolutionary descendant of it, was the cross, rendered eternally sacred by the supreme heroism of love. When man ascended from the primeval darkness, his countenance turned toward the heavens. He clutched a cross in his hand. Whence he obtained it, why he wielded it, and what he intended by it, no mortal can surmise, much less definitively affirm. In itself a paradox, its arms gesturing toward the four cardinal quarters of the earth, it is discovered in virtually every region of the globe, carved upon coinage, altars, and sepulchres, and providing a structural design for temple architecture in Mexico and Peru, within the pagodas of India, no less than within the churches of Christ. Eons before our present era, even from the remote epoch of the cliff dwellers, the cross appears to have served as a symbol of life, though for what precise reason remains unknown. More frequently, it served as an emblem of eternal life, particularly when enclosed within a circle that neither concludes nor commences, the very embodiment of eternity. Thence originates the Ankh cross or crux ansata of Egypt, the scepter of the Lord of the dead who never perish. There resides less mystery concerning the circle, which functioned as an image of the solar disk and a natural symbol of completeness, of eternity. Featuring a point situated at its center, it naturally evolved into the emblem of the eye of the world, that all-seeing eye of the eternal watcher presiding over the human tableau. Square, triangle, cross, circle, the most ancient symbols of humanity, are all profoundly eloquent, each gesturing beyond its own form, as symbols invariably do, while conferring shape upon the invisible truth they invoke and strive to embody. They possess immense beauty, provided we possess the vision to perceive it, serving not merely as serendipitous figures of the imagination, but as configurations of reality as it unveiled itself to the intellect of man. Occasionally we find them unified, the square encompassed by the circle, and within that the triangle with the cross resting at the very center. As the earliest of emblems, they offer us intimations and radiant foregleams of the most exalted faith and philosophy, revealing not solely the unity of the human mind but its inherent kinship with the eternal, the fundamental reality that rests at the root of every religion, and serves as the basis of each. Upon this faith man constructed his foundation, discovering a bedrock beneath, steadfastly refusing to conceive of death as the colossal coffin lid of a bleak and insensate universe descending upon him at last. From this brief survey of so expansive a domain, we may proceed to a more specific and meticulous examination of the early foreshadowings of Masonry within the builder's art. The symbolic must invariably succeed the actual if it is to retain relevance and significance, and the real is perpetually the foundation of the ideal. Being inherently an idealist, and inhabiting a world of radiant mystery, it was inevitable that man would ascribe moral and spiritual significance to the implements, principles, and materials of construction. Consequently, across nearly every land and throughout the most remote epochs, we observe profound and beautiful truths enveloping the builder and cleaving to his implements. Whether organized fraternities of builders existed in those primordial eras, no one can definitively ascertain, although such a possibility remains. Regardless, man infused his labor with contemplation and reverence, and as he hewed his altar stones and joined them together, he forged a faith by which to guide his life. Quite naturally, during epochs when the earth was conceived as a square, the cube possessed emblematical significances that it could scarcely hold for us today. From the earliest ages it stood as a venerated symbol, and the oblong cube signified the immensity of space from the terrestrial base to the celestial zenith. It served as a sacred emblem of the Lydian cubal, known to the Romans in subsequent ages as Ceres or Cybele, hence, as some assert, the derivation of the word cube. Initially, rough stones were deemed the most sacred, and an altar constructed of hewn stones was strictly forbidden. With the advent of the cut cube, the temple became known as the House of the Hammer, its altar, perpetually situated in the center, assuming the form of a cube and regarded as an index or emblem of truth, forever true to itself. Indeed, the cube, as Plutarch observes in his essay on the cessation of oracles, is palpably the appropriate emblem of rest, owing to the security and firmness of its superficies. He further informs us that the pyramid is an image of the triangular flame ascending from a square altar, and since no definitive knowledge exists, his conjecture is as valid as any other. At all events, Mercury, Apollo, Neptune, and Hercules were venerated in the guise of a square stone, while a substantial black stone served as the emblem of Buddha among the Hindus, of monotheist Ceres in Arabia, and of Odin in Scandinavia. It is widely acknowledged that the stone of Memnon in Egypt was reputed to speak at sunrise, just as, in truth, all stones spoke to mankind during the dawn of time. Even more eloquent, if possible, was the uplifted pillar, akin to the pillars of the gods that upheld the heavens. Whatever the origin of these pillars might have been, and multiple theories exist, Evans has demonstrated that they were universally worshipped as deities. Indeed, the gods themselves were conceptualized as pillars of light and power, just as in Egypt Horus and Sut were the twin builders and sustainers of heaven, much like Bacchus among the Thebans. At the entrance of the temple of Amenta, at the portal of the house of Ptah, as later within the porch of the temple of Solomon, there stood two pillars. Reaching still further back into the ancient solar myths, at the gateway of eternity stood two pillars. Strength and wisdom, In India, as well as among the Mayas and Incas, there were 3 pillars gracing the portals of the earthly and celestial temple: wisdom, strength, and beauty. When man erected a pillar, he became a fellow worker with him, whom the ancient sages of China termed the first builder. Furthermore, pillars were erected to demarcate sacred sites of vision and divine deliverance, as evidenced when Jacob raised a pillar at Bethel, Joshua at Gilgal, and Samuel at Mizpeh and Shun. They perpetually stood as symbols of stability, denoting what the Egyptians described as the place of establishing forever, remaining emblems of the faith that the pillars of the earth belong to the Lord, and that he hath set the world upon them. Long before our current era, we find the working implements of the mason utilized as emblems of the very truths they continue to impart today. Within the oldest classical text of China, the Book of History, which dates back to the 20th century before Christ, we read the instruction, "Ye officers of the government, apply the compasses." Even if we commence where the Book of History concludes, we encounter numerous similar allusions spanning more than 700 years prior to the Christian era. For example, within the renowned canonical work entitled The Great Learning, which has been attributed to the 5th century BC, we read that a man should abstain from doing unto others what he would not wish they should do to him, and this, the writer adds, is termed the principle of acting on the square. Thus also taught Confucius and his esteemed disciple Mencius. The writings of Mencius impart that men should morally apply the square and compasses to their lives, alongside the level and the marking line, should they desire to walk the straight and even paths of wisdom, keeping themselves within the boundaries of honor and virtue. In the 6th book of his philosophy we encounter these words. A master mason, in instructing apprentices, employs the compasses and the square. Ye who are engaged in the pursuit of wisdom must likewise make use of the compass and square. There is even evidence, within the earliest historical records of China, of the existence of a faith system expressed in allegorical form and illustrated by the symbols of building. The mysteries of this faith appear to have been transmitted orally, with the leaders alone professing a comprehensive knowledge thereof. Curiously enough, it appears to have centered around a symbolical temple erected in the desert, wherein the various officers of the faith were distinguished by symbolic jewels, and during its rites, they donned leather aprons. From the surviving records, it is impossible to determine whether the builders themselves utilized their tools as emblems, or whether it was the philosophers who initially employed them to impart moral truths. In any case, their significance was understood, and the salient point remains that, even in such antiquity, the implements of the builder served as instructors of wise, benevolent, and beautiful truths. Indeed, we need not look beyond the Bible to find both the materials and the working tools of the mason employed in precisely this manner. For every house is constructed by some man, but the builder of all things is God, whose house we are. Behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. The stone which the builders rejected is become the head of the corner. Ye also, as living stones, are built up into a spiritual house. When he established the heavens I was there, when he set the compass upon the face of the deep, when he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then was I by him as a master workman. The Lord stood upon a wall made by a plumbline, with a plumbline in his hand. And the Lord said unto me, Amos, what sayest thou? And I said, A plumbline. Then said the Lord, Behold, I will set a plumbline in the midst of my people Israel. I will not again pass by them any more. Ye shall offer the holy oblation foursquare, with the possession of the city. And the city lieth foursquare, and the length is as large as the breadth. Him that overcometh I will make a pillar in the temple of my God, and I will write upon him my new name. For we know that when our earthly house of this tabernacle is dissolved, we have a building of God, an house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Should further proof be required, it has been preserved for us within the imperishable stones of Egypt. The renowned obelisk known as Cleopatra's Needle, now situated in Central Park, New York, a gift to our nation from Ismail, Khedive of Egypt in 1878, stands as a mute yet eloquent witness to the antiquity of the Mason's rudimentary symbols. Originally, it stood among a forest of obelisks surrounding the magnificent temple of the sun god at Heliopolis, so long a preeminent seat of Egyptian learning and religion, believed to date back to the 15th century before Christ. It was subsequently relocated to Alexandria and re-erected by a Roman architect and engineer named Pontius, 22 BC. Upon its dismantling in 1879 to be transported to America, all the emblems of the builders were discovered within the foundation. The rough cube and the polished cube crafted in pure white limestone, the square carved from syenite, an iron trowel, a lead plummet, the arc of a circle, the serpent symbols of wisdom, a stone trestle board, a stone bearing the master's mark, and a hieroglyphic word signifying temple. All were so arranged and preserved as to demonstrate, beyond any doubt, that they possessed profound symbolic meaning. Whether these artifacts were present in the original foundation or were deposited there when the obelisk was relocated, no one can definitively tell. Nevertheless, they remained there, serving as concrete witnesses of the fact that the ancient builders labored in the light of a mystical faith, of which they were the emblems. Much has been chronicled regarding buildings, their origins, antiquity, and architectural design, but of the builders scarcely a word is spared. So swiftly is the laborer forgotten, enduring only save as he lives on in his work. Although we possess no records other than these emblems, it remains an obvious inference that there existed fraternal orders of builders even in those nascent ages, to whom these symbols were held sacred, and this deduction becomes the more plausible when we consider the paramount importance of the builder both to religion and the state. Even though the builders have crumbled into dust, to which all mortal things inevitably decline, they continue to extend their symbols for us to read, articulating their thoughts in a language easy to understand. Across the accumulated debris of the ages they whisper the ancient familiar truths, and it shall constitute a portion of this study to trace those symbols throughout the centuries, demonstrating that they have consistently borne the same exalted meanings. They bear witness not merely to the fundamental unity of the human mind, but to the existence of a universal system of truth veiled in allegory and imparted through symbols. As such, they stand as prophecies of Masonry as it is known today, whose particular genius is to take that which is old, simple, and universal, and employ it to unite men together and make them friends. Shore calls to shore that the line is unbroken. Chapter 3. The Drama of Faith. And so the quest goes on. And the quest, as it may be, culminates in attainment, though we know not where and when. So long as we can conceive of our separate existence, the quest endures, and attainment continued henceforward. And ever shall the study of the ways which have been followed by those who have preceded us be a profound aid on our own path. It is well, it is of all things beautiful and perfect, most holy and high of all, to be conscious of the way which does in fine lead thither where We seek to journey, namely, the goal that rests in God. Taking nothing with us which does not belong to our authentic nature, leaving nothing behind us that is of our true selves, we shall find in the great attainment that the companions of our toil stand with us. And the place is the Valley of Peace. Arthur Edward Waite. The Secret Tradition. Mankind does not live by bread alone. He lives by faith, hope, and love, and the foremost among these was faith. Nothing within the annals of human history is more striking than the persistent, passionate, and profound protest of mankind against death. Even in the most primordial epochs we see him daring to stand erect before the gates of the grave, disputing its grim verdict, refusing to grant it the final word, and articulating a fervent argument in behalf of his own soul. For Emerson, as for Addison, that singular fact alone stood as proof enough of immortality, as revealing a universal intuition of eternal life. Others may not be so easily convinced, but no individual who possesses the heart of a man can fail to be profoundly impressed by the ancient, heroic faith of his race. Nowhere has this faith ever manifested more vividly or victoriously than among the ancient Egyptians. In the venerable Book of the Dead, which is indeed a book of resurrection, there occur the words, "The soul to heaven, the body to earth," and that inaugural faith remains our faith today. Concerning King Unas, who reigned in the 3rd millennium, it is written, "Behold, thou hast not departed as one dead, but as one living." Nor has anyone in our modern era articulated this faith with more unadorned eloquence than the hymn to Osiris, preserved in the papyrus of Hunfer. Thus in the pyramid texts the departed are spoken of as those who ascend, the imperishable ones who shine as stars, and the deities are invoked to witness the passing of the king dawning as a soul. There resonates a profound prophecy, albeit tinged with poignant pathos, within these fragmented exclamations inscribed upon the pyramid walls. "Thou deest not. Have ye said that he would die? He deest not. This King Pepi lives forever. Live! Thou shalt not die. He has escaped his day of death. Thou livest, thou livest. Raise thee up. Thou deest not. Stand up. Raise thee up. Thou perishest not eternally. Thou deest not." Nevertheless, neither poetry nor chant nor solemn ritual could render death as anything other than death, and the pyramid texts, while steadfastly refusing to utter the fatal word, offer wistful reminiscences of that blessed epoch before death first came forth. No matter how exalted the faith of man, the masterful negation and collapse of the physical body remained an inescapable fact, and it was precisely to keep that daring faith alive and aglow that the mysteries were originally instituted. Beginning, perhaps, in simple incantation, they ascended to unparalleled heights of influence and beauty, offering a dramatic portrayal of mankind's unconquerable faith. Observing the sun ascend from the tomb of night, and witnessing the glorious return of spring following the death of winter, man reasoned by analogy, justifying a faith that held him as firmly as he held it, that the human race, though sinking into the grave, would ultimately rise triumphant over death. Numerous variations upon this theme emerged as the drama of faith evolved, and as it traversed from land to land, but the motif remained perpetually unaltered, and all were derived, whether directly or indirectly, from the ancient Osirian passion play of Egypt. Set against the background of the ancient solar religion, Osiris made his advent as the lord of the Nile and the fecund spirit of vegetative life, son of Nut the sky goddess and Geb the earth god, and nothing within the chronicles of the Nile dwellers is more deeply appealing than his triumphant conquest of the people's hearts against all conceivable odds. Be that as it may, this extensive history need not detain us here, save to observe that by the time his passion had evolved into the drama of the national faith, it had been suffused with all the tender hues of mortal existence, even though a measure of its original solar radiance still lingered within it. Suffice it to say that of all the deities, summoned into being by the hopes and fears of the ancients who dwelled in times of yore along the banks of the Nile, Osiris was unequivocally the most beloved. Osiris, the benign father, Isis, his sorrowful and faithful wife, and Horus, whose filial piety and heroism shine like diamonds amidst a pile of stones. Around this sacred trinity were woven the loftiest ideals of Egyptian faith and familial devotion. Hearken now to the narrative of the oldest drama known to our race, which for more than 3 millennia held captive the hearts of men. Osiris stood as the ruler of eternity, but by virtue of his visible form, he appeared profoundly akin to mortal man, thereby revealing a truly divine humanity. His triumphs were chiefly attributable, however, to the gracious eloquence of Isis, his sister wife, whose compelling charm men could neither wholly fathom nor successfully resist. Together they labored for the betterment of mankind, teaching humanity to discern those plants fit for sustenance, while they themselves pressed the grapes and partook of the very first cup of wine. They revealed the hidden veins of metal coursing beneath the earth, of which humanity had previously been entirely ignorant, and instructed man in the forging of weapons. Furthermore, they initiated mankind into the intellectual and moral spheres of existence, imparting knowledge of ethics and religion, how to read the starry firmament, and the rhythmic arts of song and dance. Above all else, they evoked within the human spirit a profound sense of immortality, of a destiny extending far beyond the confines of the tomb. Nevertheless, they faced adversaries who were simultaneously obtuse and cunning, keen-witted yet profoundly short-sighted, representing the dark force of evil that continues to weave the fringe of criminality along the borders of human existence. Existing side by side with Osiris, lived the impious Set Typhon, much as evil perpetually haunts the steps of good. During the absence of Osiris, Typhon, whose very name signifies serpent, being consumed by envy and malice, sought to usurp his throne, but his treacherous plot was ultimately thwarted by Isis, whereupon he resolved to assassinate Osiris. This he accomplished, having invited him to a banquet, by persuading him to enter a chest, offering, as if in jest, to bestow the hand-carved vessel upon any one of his guests who, lying down inside it, found he was of the precise dimensions. The moment Osiris stepped in and stretched himself out, the conspirators sealed the chest and cast it into the Nile. Until this moment, the deities had not known death. They had advanced in years, acquiring white hair and trembling limbs, but senility had not culminated in death. As soon as Isis learned of this infernal treachery, she severed her hair, cloaked herself in the garb of mourning, hastened thither and yon, a prey to the most agonizing anguish, seeking the corpse. Weeping and distraught, she never tarried, never tired in her sorrowful quest. Meanwhile, the currents carried the chest out to sea, as far as Byblos in Syria, the city of Adonis, where it lodged against a shrub of areca or tamarisk, resembling an acacia tree. Owing to the inherent virtue of the body, the shrub at its touch burgeoned into a magnificent tree, growing around it and protecting it, until the sovereign of that country felled the tree which hid the chest in its bosom, and fashioned from it a column for his palace. At last Isis, guided by a vision, arrived at Byblos, revealed her identity, and entreated the king for the column. Hence the depiction of her weeping over a shattered column, torn from the palace, while Horus, the god of time, stands behind her pouring ambrosia. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.